This is the world's oldest Six Flags, with the world's first mine train, the oldest log flume on Earth, and a wooden coaster that's literally themed to a judge? Plus, a few modern coasters, like one of the tallest coasters in America, and an insane launch coaster. And today I'm writing that, and so much more to find out. Does Six Flags Over Texas still hold up, or is it too outdated? Starting with Shockwave, which was built back in 1978 and is still the most forceful coaster on Earth, pulling an absurd 5.5 Gs.
Nothing else on Earth is even close.
It starts by diving down a somewhat janky drop and blasting into a massive, unbelievably forceful loop, which is literally the most intense moment on any coaster on Earth. I immediately nearly blacked out.
I can't see!
And I was shoved into my seat with so much force it felt like I weighed 1,000 pounds. My vision returned right at the end of the loop, just in time to hit another equally powerful loop that had me blacking out all over again. We shot out of the loop and, right as I was starting to catch my breath, popped up, which slightly tossed me into the air before we hit a wonky turn, slowly turning around, then falling down a wild drop that threw me into the air. Then slammed me back down as we rose back up and snapped into a turn. We turned around again, this time building up more and more speed and plowing down an even wilder drop, shooting me into the lap bar with so much force that it hurt.
What is happening?
We bounced right back up, flying over another insane hill and yanking me into a turn that rose up, then popped over a somewhat unassuming hill that was just as wild as all the other ones. Finally, the coaster decided to chill out as we went straight, then gradually turned around and hopped back up into the brakes.
I cannot believe that coaster still exists. This is the type of coaster you will only find at a super old park like this.
From there, I walked past a swing ride themed to guns and went over to one of the park's more modern coasters, Mr. Freeze, which stands over 200 feet tall, starts with an absolutely insane 0 to 70 mile an hour launch, goes backwards, and completely traumatized me as a child.
So I rode this exact same coaster at a different Six Flags park when I was a child, and after getting off, I did not ride another coaster for like a year. This thing rattled me bones, it scared me to my core, it shivered me timbers, all of that stuff you can say. Like, I've never been more shaken by a coaster than Mr. Freeze. So out of oh my god, that is loud. So out of every single coaster in this park, this is the one I'm most afraid of.
It starts in one of the most unique ways I've ever seen a coaster start, with the station slowly sliding to the side and lining up with the launch track. Then we just sat there in silence for a second, waiting.
Dude, I'm actually so scared.
Until suddenly, we launched. We flew down the tunnel, going faster and faster before blasting out into the sun, completely blinding me. My eyes were still adjusting to the sun as we soared up and twisted over into a massive upside-down top hat, holding me upside down super far above the ground before we snapped back and dove to the ground. Before I could even catch my breath, we shot up into a huge turn that dangled me sideways for a second before plunging to the ground and immediately entering into one of the most unique moments on any coaster I've ever ridden. We rocketed up a towering vertical spike, climbing higher and higher. Then, about halfway up, another launch kicked in and shoved us even higher, creating one of the most unique sensations I've ever experienced on a coaster. It was almost like gravity just disappeared as I was floating, feeling completely weightless as the train just floated up. Then, as quickly as it started, the launch turned off and we started hurtling backwards. Out of nowhere, we hit the ground and the track twisted, slamming me down as we started rising up to a turn in a shockingly forceful moment that I was not prepared for and completely steamed my ham. We ripped through the turn way faster than the first time, then climbed back up into that massive inverted top hat again. This time, it was so much slower and held me upside down for what felt like forever. I was just dangling there, completely weightless, over 100 feet in the air. Finally, the train snapped back. We fell out of the top hat and slammed into the tunnel, ending the ride.
I can see why that was too much for me as a kid. Oh my god. Oh, that was awesome though. That's legitimately one of the most intense coasters I've ever ridden.
Now, from the top of that coaster, I could see the world's first mine train, which I was weirdly excited about riding. But first, I decided to ride the coaster that was literally next to Mr. Freeze, Batman, the ride.
As opposed to Batman, the popsicle. You wouldn't want to get those two things confused. It's a good thing they specified. This is like the most common roller coaster in the world. Like, if you've been to a Six Flags park before, I can almost guarantee guarantee that you have at least seen a Batman coaster, if not ridden one. And if you've been to multiple Six Flags parks, you have ridden this same coaster so many times that you've gotten tired of it. That said, I don't think I've ridden a Batman coaster on this channel before, which is kind of wild when you think about it. So I'm kind of excited. Let's go ride the first Batman coaster. Oh my God, it's loud too.
It starts with the most hellish line I have ever waited in. Not because it was long, but because it was just unbearably uncomfortable. First, when I was outside, they were just blasting the station announcements for some reason, which was really annoying, but I would much rather have this than what came next, because after that, I had to wait 15 minutes in a giant metal box with zero air conditioning. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I made it to the station, and I could actually start the ride, which, while climbing the lift hill, gave me an incredible view of a giant freeway, which is the most Texan thing I've ever seen, except for that one swing ride that's themed to guns. Anyways, while I was taking in the gorgeous view, the coaster dropped down a little dip, snapped to the side, and twisted to the ground. We immediately shot up into a super forceful loop that pulled all the blood to my legs before rising up and flipping through an insane roll that threw me to the side while making me feel weightless. Then we dove to the ground and, before I could even process what was happening, blasted into another insane loop that was somehow even more powerful than the first one. We snapped to the side, then twisted up an absurdly forceful helix that made me start to black out a little before going straight for a little, giving me a chance to catch my breath. It only lasted for a second though, as we were yanked to the side and spiraled down to the ground. Out of nowhere, we snapped through a crazy corkscrew, throwing me to the side and slamming me into my seat as my legs spiraled over my head. Then we twisted past that second loop, dropped down a little drop, and right as I was just recovering from that first corkscrew, snapped through yet another one. Finally, we turned around and hit the brakes, letting me process what the heck just happened.
A lot of coaster nerds who go to all kinds of parks all over the country, ride tons and tons of coasters, kind of hate on this thing because there's just so many of them, but it's so good. It's like a peanut butter sandwich. Like, you can have this thing 1,000 different times and it's not going to be the best thing you've ever ridden. It's not going to be the best sandwich you've ever had, but it's still going to be a good time.
After that, I went over to the world's first mine train, the Runaway Mine Train, which, despite literally being a mine train, I was actually super excited for.
This started the whole revolution of every single park in the world having a mine train. This changed the entirety of the theme park world. It was also built in 1966, so my expectations aren't that high, but I mean, it did kind of change everything, so it's got to be special somehow.
It starts with a little drop into a super slow turn that took us to the coaster's first lift. At the top, we got an absolutely incredible view of Mr. Freeze as we turned around, then roughly snapped to the side, only to roughly snap to the other side and dive to the ground. We bounced back up, then popped over a little hill and jankily twisted the other way, hugging the ground, then going up a bit and dropping down into a somewhat painful turn that took us through a cave where we turned the other way, then burst back out into the day and popped over a little hill before we started to climb up the second lift. When we got to the top, instead of going down a drop, we slowly turned around, then turned the other way and went straight, taking us right past Shockwave as we slid through a very slow turn. We dropped down a tiny bit, building up some speed, then smashing into another janky turn that went under the train and took us into yet another lift hill, which pulled us up into an old western saloon. We didn't stick around for long as we plummeted down a surprisingly good drop and into a crazy tunnel, turning to the side before jankily popping up into the brakes.
By the way, when I say that something's janky, I don't necessarily mean it's bad. I got a lot of people coming at me with pitchforks after I said that some of the coasters at Cedar Point are janky. They are, but these people were responding like I just murdered their dog. But for a coaster like this, if it wasn't janky, it would be the lamest coaster of all time. The jank gives it character, but it is undeniably a fact that it is indeed janky, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I see why people bought more mine trains after that opened. I wouldn't particularly call it a thrilling ride. It's a goddamn mine train, but as far as mine trains come, I'm not gonna lie, it was a pretty solid mine train.
After that, I went deeper into the park and came across the Justice League ride, which I was really confused by. There was a big sign out front saying it was closed for technical adjustments, but the gates were open and the line looked open, so I decided to go and see if it was actually open, which it turned out to be, and I was able to literally walk on. I don't entirely know what was up with the sign, but good lord did this ride actually really needs some technical adjustments. It started pretty normal with us going into the streets of Gotham and immediately coming across the Joker and a bunch of henchmen setting up laughing gas. We shot at them for a bit before Superman showed up and almost captured Joker, only to be taken down by Lex Luthor in a discomfortingly quiet scene. We spun around and came across the Joker, who's riding on a tank and says he's gonna blow you up if you don't subscribe.
What? I can't believe he'd say something like that. I mean, it's probably fine. I doubt he'd do anything to this inanimate trash can that physically can't subscribe. Oh god dang, it just blew up.
This is the stupidest bit I have ever done. We spun our way out of Joker's hideout and immediately drove into oncoming traffic, nearly getting hit by a truck that somehow warps reality in the official POV. What is happening? In our slow escape from the truck, we stumbled into a very laggy LexCorp.
One frame per second.
Where we got surrounded by robots until the Batmobile showed up, destroying some of the bots and giving us a chance to get into LexCorp. We hear Lex Luthor's disembodied voice try and intimidate us, which really didn't work.
Oh no, I'm so scared that we're going into pure silence.
Well, it was pure silence for a little, then a shelf of barrels fell over into the loudest thing I've ever heard.
Ah, Jesus Christ. Okay, I take it back. I prefer the silence. Oh, thank God it's back.
We twisted our way in pure silence over to the next scene where we see Lex Luthor, who reveals all the heroes he's captured, which we have to try and free in an intense action sequence that somehow manages to progressively get quieter throughout. Eventually, we free the Flash, who tells us,
I got this.
It is so discomfortingly quiet.
We back out of the containment area and start chasing the Joker and Lex, taking down henchmen and getting hit by a wrecking ball before going through a loop and smashing into a building. We back up in complete silence, then head back into the street and dive down into the subway where Joker catches a train that's filled with henchmen, and after shooting at it for a bit, we corkscrew over the train. Superman shows up and catches the villains, throwing them through a few pillars and slamming Lex into an electrical box, which violently electrocutes him as the world fades to black around us. Did we die or something? Right across from that experience is the park's water coaster, Aquaman, which I really wanted to ride, but I completely hate being wet, and if there is one ride in this park that is gonna completely soak me, it's this ride.
So I go, okay, well, I don't have a poncho on me. I'm sure they sell a poncho in the parks. Let me go to the shop. Let me check how much a poncho costs. It costs $10 for one poncho. So I did not buy that, and because of that, we're not gonna be riding this today. Now that said, I have actually ridden this ride before. I've ridden basically nothing else in this entire park except for this ride. We were in Texas a few years ago, the day that this ride opened, and so we went, shoot, we can come here for an hour and give it a ride. So we came, I'm genuinely one of the first people that ever rode this coaster, and then we left, so I can actually talk about this coaster even though I'm not gonna ride it today.
It starts, just like Mr. Freeze, in a super unique way, with the station slowly rotating around until we lined up with the coaster track. Then we just sat there for a second before launching backwards in one of the slowest and most boring launches I've ever experienced, slowly pulling us over this little hill. We dropped down, went straight for a second before going halfway up a vertical spike and dropping back down, now going forwards. Then, after going straight again, we hit the launch for a second time, throwing the train over the hill and chucking me into the air with a surprising amount of force before we shot pretty far up another vertical spike and fell backwards again. Out of nowhere, we hit the launch again, which threw me into the lap bar while blasting the train over the hump with a shocking amount of power that, because we were going backwards, I was not ready for. We shot backwards over the water and flew to nearly the top of the spike, which is when some gates opened and flooded the track. We dropped off the spike and dove towards the ground, slamming into the water and creating a monstrous wave, drenching everyone on board. Finally, the coaster gave everyone a chance to reflect on their choice to ride as it slowly creeped up and rotated its way back into the station.
Now, I wasn't vlogging back then, so I don't have any footage of my first reactions to it or anything like that, but I do remember really liking it. It was way better than I expected it to be, and a very large amount of that probably comes from the fact that we actually remembered to bring ponchos. I really hate being wet.
But despite my hatred of being wet, I was still gonna do one water ride even without a poncho. That, of course, being the world's oldest log flume, which is one of the most historically significant rides in the world. First though, I came across whatever this is, and because it was actually well themed, I decided to check it out, which ended up taking so much longer than I expected, because it broke down when I was halfway through the line.
But at least this gives me an opportunity to talk about the crazy coaster the park just
announced for 2026. This is going to be the world's tallest, fastest, and longest dive coaster, standing at a mind-boggling 306 feet tall, and then holding you facing straight down that drop. Now, there's a lot of people online who are like really hating on this thing for some reason, saying that it's going to be one of the worst coasters ever, and like, I don't know, I might be taking crazy pills, but it looks pretty stinking incredible to me. Like, drop aside, if that first loop was a standalone coaster, it would be, as of recording, the 22nd tallest coaster in the world. That is the first loop! If there's someone from the park watching, please invite me to Media Day. Like, you've made it this far in the video already, you can probably see that I could put together a pretty solid video. Wouldn't it be cool if I put a video like this together for your new coaster? Anyways, after a bit, the mystery ride came back up, and I made my way into the station where I saw that it was a coaster. Now, unfortunately, despite the coaster having great theming outside and in the line, the ride itself was just in the pitch black. It starts with a little drop to the side, which, due to the darkness, I did not see coming, before launching over a little hill and twisting to the side in a slow turn that suddenly becomes a drop, diving to the ground in a moment that completely caught me off guard. Out of nowhere, we smashed into a turn that twisted up, then slowed down, and I thought the ride might be over. Out of nowhere, though, we violently snapped to the side and plummeted to the ground, only to forcefully rise back up. The ride gave me a second to catch my breath as we slowly went forwards, then started twisting through a helix that looked slow but felt super fast in the dark. We dropped down a little, then rose up and entered into a surprisingly intense downward helix before popping up and hitting the brakes.
I'm not gonna lie, like, I went in not knowing what this ride is, and I can't lie, I'm walking out a little bit disappointed still, because, like, the outside is stinking sick, the theming out here is amazing, and then the ride starts, and it's like they ran out of budget and just decided, we'll put it in a giant steel box, it's fine. Like, I can't believe they made an entire ride themed to Batman's queue.
After that, I went over to one of the most historically significant coasters, not just in the park, but in the world, New Texas Giant. It's kind of hard for me to explain the significance of this coaster if you're not like a diehard coaster enthusiast, but here is a very quick rundown. This is the first coaster ever created by Rocky Mountain Construction, better known as RMC, who, despite being a fairly new company, has completely changed the game for roller coasters. They started out with a fairly simple concept. We're gonna take your old junky wooden coaster that everyone hates, we're gonna poke it with some steel, and bada bing, bada boom, you got yourself a brand new world-class coaster. And they did this to incredible success, giving both small parks and big parks alike new top-tier roller coasters. They are responsible for some of the world's highest-rated coasters like Steel Vengeance, Iron Gwazi, Zadra, and so many more coasters that have pushed the limits of crazy coasters and innovated in the way that coasters are designed. Like, genuinely, RMC's fingerprints can be felt on basically every single major coaster created in the past, like, 10 years, whether that be in the pacing, the intensity, or even down to the element choice. So much of modern coaster design can be traced back to RMC, and by extension, the New Texas Giant.
It's an incredibly historically significant and important coaster that, I'm gonna be completely honest, does not look that good. I've been looking at it, I've been filming it off-ride, and I go, dang, this does not look good. That said, these types of coasters, more often than not, are absolutely just gobsmacking, make you lose your mind, utterly amazing coasters. But I feel like this coaster, it's either going to be the best coaster in the park or the biggest disappointment of the day, and I don't think there's an in-between.
When I made it into the station, I noticed two things. One is that the train design is sick, and two is that there is a literal chicken coop in the station where they put you if you chicken out of the ride. What? I have never seen anything like this before. Anyways, the coaster starts with a crazy drop, throwing me out of my seat and pinning me against the lap bar as we plummeted towards the ground, then shot up into a little hill, floating me into the air before twisting up into a huge turn that held me sideways as we slowly turned around. We dove out of the turn and immediately up into yet another giant slow turn, holding me sideways, snapping out and diving back down, only to quickly rise back up into yet another giant turn. We dropped out of the turn and immediately flew over a wild hill, ejecting me out of my seat for a second before slamming me back down as we twisted up into some brakes that slightly slowed us down as we entered into the second half, which started with a crazy drop off the brakes, chucking me skywards and yanking me to the side at the same time as we dove through the wooden supports. We rose up and popped over another hill that was substantially weaker than the previous one, then slowly turned around around and bounced over another hill that lightly tossed me up as we dipped back towards the ground, turning around, hopping over another hill, still turning, that didn't do anything, and twisting back to the ground. We hopped over yet another weak hill, then twisted to the side and flew over a twisting hill before rising up into a tunnel, turning around, shooting out into the daylight, and flying into yet another tunnel with a weird hill inside that abruptly turned into a turn, taking us back out to the sun, then dropping down into another tunnel. We flew over a crazy hill, then shot out into the sun and flew over yet another one, and another one, all throwing me into the lap bar before finally sliding into the brakes, ending a good ride that unfortunately did not live up to the super high standards these types of coasters normally hit.
Like, if you're not a coaster nerd, there's really no way for me to explain just how revered the people that made this coaster are. To use a professional wrestling comparison, which is on my mind because literally yesterday I was at AEW All In, which is like the greatest wrestling show I've ever seen. The people that made that coaster are like the Will Ospreay of the theme park world. And the people who know what that means know what that means. Like, as a default level, it's gonna be very good. A Will Ospreay match, it's gonna be very good. A coaster built by these people, it's gonna be very good. But most of the time, it's so much better than very good. Most of the time, it is absolute world class, just utterly knocks your socks off, blows you away. And so when it's not that good and it's just very good, it's very disappointing because the expectations were so much higher.
After that, I went over to yet another extremely historically significant ride, the world's first log flume, El Aserradero, which, despite being one of the most important rides ever created, I really wasn't looking forward to riding.
I'm gonna keep it 1000% honest. I do not want to ride this. Like, I do and I don't. Like, if this was not a historically significant ride, I would not even think about riding it. I hate being wet. I hate nothing more than walking around and being wet. But this is the first log flume ever created. Like, this is such a historically significant ride, and I feel like I've said that like 50 times in this video. Genuinely, what park does not have a log flume? This is a very historically significant ride. I just wish it was anything but a log flume.
This is kind of a hard ride to talk about because it doesn't really do much of anything. The majority of the ride is basically just a slow-moving, calm trip through the woods. There were a few splashes on some of the turns, but thankfully nothing hit me, and by the time we were halfway through, I actually forgot about the drop at the end, and I was starting to relax. That was until we started climbing up to the top of that drop. Then, before I had any time to prepare, we started plummeting down, smacking into the water, which thankfully completely missed me.
Thank the Lord, I am not wet. I was so worried that I was gonna walk off that soaked. Now, my fear of getting wet besides, that was genuinely one of the best log flumes I've ever ridden. Now, to be fair, I haven't ridden many log flumes. I could count how many log flumes I've ridden this year on how many articulatable toes I have. 3. So, like, I don't have a ton of points of comparison, but that was still pretty fun. And now, whoa, Jesus Christ, they're shooting guns. Well, we're in Texas, that's what they do here. Anyways.
I remember that there's another coaster on the other side of the park that I completely forgot to ride that has one of the wildest themes I've ever seen, the Judge Roy Scream, which is literally themed to a Texas judge.
You could give me 1,000 guesses as to what this coaster would be themed, and not a single one of them would be to a judge. What?
The ride itself is actually in a really unique location. It's almost on an island next to the parking lot, and to get to it, I had to walk under a road, then climb up some fairly janky looking stairs before I made it to the station, climbed on the train, and started the coaster, which starts with a slow turnaround onto the slow lift. And when I made it to the top, I noticed something interesting.
Does that say appeal denied?
After getting our appeal denied, we fell down the decent drop, then out of nowhere got slammed to the side by a crazy intense turn that I was not expecting. Before I could really process that, we were flying up into a huge hill that levitated me into the air a bit at the beginning, then slowly creeped over the top before dropping back down and soaring over a smaller hill that tossed me out of my seat. Then we floated over another hill and popped up into a super slow turnaround. We shakily turned around, then dropped down and roughly made our way over another hill that was too slow to throw me in the air, but was not slow enough to not be painful. By the way, the first half of this coaster I remember being decently smooth, apart from that one turn, but the second half was really rough, shaking and bumbling its way way through another turn and a few super slow hills.
So I don't get the theme. I don't understand how Judge Roy, whoever he is, works into the plot of this ride, except for the fact that above the drop, there's a big sign that just says appeal denied. So is the coaster our ride to prison after having our appeal denied? Is that the theme of this ride? You know what? I'm all for it though. Like, as much as I joke, I'm all for coasters having just the most bizarre themes of all time. God dang, let's keep it running.
After that, it was time to walk all the way over to the other side of the park again to take on the tallest and fastest coaster in all of Texas, at least until that one new dive coaster opens, Titan, which is actually one of the most controversial coasters in the country.
Some people say it's one of the most intense coasters in the country, while others say it was only ever built to be big, marketable, and look cool instead of actually being a good ride.
Anyways, there was shockingly no line, and before I knew it, I was climbing up the enormous 240-foot tall lift, giving me a chance to look around and take in the views. I didn't get long though, as we started plummeting down the drop, building up a ludicrous amount of speed as we kept falling down, going faster and faster, eventually blasting through a tunnel. And with this much speed, you'd expect the next element to be crazy and take full advantage of it, right? Nah, we shot out of the tunnel and flew up into a super tall, super slow turnaround. This was extremely disappointing because we were going like 90 miles an hour and now we're going like 20. But at the same time, it was kind of cool because this turn was way taller than most coasters and provided some decent views, though I really wish it did something more exciting with the speed. We twisted to the side, then started diving to the ground, yet again picking up a mind-boggling amount of speed, and this time we actually used it for something. Soaring up and over a wild hill that threw me out of my seat, then held me in the air for ages as we rocketed forwards. We dropped off the hill, then went straight for a little for some reason, before banking to the side and entering into one of the most intense moments on any coaster I've ever experienced. A super fast, crazy forceful helix that shoved me into the seat and held me there as it spun around with so much force that I nearly blacked out. We twisted out of the helix and, right as my vision was returning, hit the brakes, which nearly completely stopped the train, killing all the momentum we had. This might be the single biggest buzzkill on any coaster ever. We slowly made our way off the brakes and twisted down, rising up and turning around the other way, then shooting towards the ground, regaining a good amount of speed before entering into yet another brutal helix that also made me slightly black out as we just spun around and around, eventually twisting out, rising up, only to swerve to the side and twist back down, snapping back the other way, rising up and blasting into the brakes.
So I get why that's an extremely controversial coaster. It's big, it's tall, but the drop doesn't do a whole lot of much. I mean, like, it's a big fast drop, but it don't throw you out of your seat or anything exciting like that. And what it does with that speed is it just goes up and turns around. But that is low-key one of the most forceful coasters I've ever ridden. Like, the first helix dang near knocked me out, and I'm not joking. Now, of course, I am extremely dehydrated because this park's water fountains are harder to find than, I don't know, second Bigfoot. But I mean, the force was insane. The second helix too, I just wish halfway through it didn't completely stop the train. Like, if it didn't do that, that would be the world's most intense coaster.
So overall, would I say that the oldest Six Flags still holds up? Yeah, it's very clear that they've put a lot of effort into both preserving the park's history, like the log flume, while also modernizing the park and still making sure that it feels historic without making it feel outdated. It does definitely have a few rough spots, like the Justice League ride, and then there was this huge open area that was just blacktop surrounded by walls for some reason, which was really weird, but the park as a whole is easily an above average Six Flags park. Now, if you want to see a very above average park, you should check out this video from Knott's Berry Farm.
You need to like and subscribe.